And as I'm sure many of you know, Jay Reatard sort of tragically and mysteriously died, I guess a little bit over a year and a half ago now, at his house in Memphis. And in the wake of his death, a documentary has been produced, which is screening at MIF this year. And there's one screening last weekend, another this weekend. As I mentioned earlier, last time I checked, there were still tickets. So if you're a Jay Reatard fan, jump onto the MIF website and check it out. But for everyone else, I recorded an interview last week with the directors of the film, and I started out by asking them the origins of the film and just how it came about.
Sure. Basically, I guess the simple way of putting it is that Jay was at a point where he had a new record he was working on that was coming out. It was through Matador, and they wanted to do press, but Jay was getting kind of sick of the press, the way the press had been. I guess he just had this idea they weren't really telling his story, or that there was some side of him people weren't seeing. So between him and his manager, they had this idea of doing a film of some sort. It was like an EPK, basically, and it would be something that would just be very, it wasn't an interview necessarily or something like that. It wasn't an article. It would be something that they could show around and convince people to maybe look at the record or whatever. I mean, we were a little unclear what they wanted it for, but we ended up meeting with Jay. They were looking at different filmmakers. We met Jay sort of through a friend of a friend that was at Matador, and how's the best way to say it? Jay just sort of on the spot decided, well, okay, let's do it.
Exactly. I mean, we sat and met with him and the manager, and he had seen our work. We sent him links of work that we'd done, and Ian and I had been doing a documentary at the time, and he liked it. And 2 weeks later, we went down to Memphis and started shooting with him. And that's where basically most of the footage of the film comes from, from that short we made originally.
So it looks like, am I right in the thought that you made this 20-minute documentary waiting for something, and then some months later, Jay dies very suddenly, and from being an EPK, you flesh out and expand the film and talk to his family and friends, and in many ways it becomes more of a sort of memorial and tribute of a film.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. The thing was is that even as an EPK, the film ended up taking on, as a short, it took on its own life, because it was never supposed to be like a 20-minute piece, and it wasn't intended to be the film that it became. But when we went down to shoot with Jay, that was also not what we expected, and Jay kind of gave us something pretty unpredictable, which was just to give us his whole life story and also his whole life philosophy.
Yeah, no one's ever really captured that sort of intimate interview, and especially in Memphis with him. I mean, it was really shocking to us, even from the shore when we were with him, just how open and honest he was about his stories and where he'd come from, and really brought us around to all of his homes he grew up in, and so when he died, we didn't actually think of pushing to make the feature. It was something we discussed with him at one point.
But it would have been obviously a very different thing.
Yeah, it was definitely.
Like we would go on the road with him or something, instead of it just being about him in his hometown. And also we had interviewed and talked with a lot of friends when we had been in Memphis that first time. Jay actually pushed us to meet with a lot of people, including some people that didn't particularly like him, or that he had been, when he was younger and even more difficult, that he had kind of, I guess pissed off. So some of that had already happened, and a lot of the people we talked to were people Jay led us to, or other friends led us to, or, I guess even sometimes an enemy or so led us there. But, one thing we really realized was that Jay didn't really have enemies. So it wasn't like we were digging up dirt. It was just kind of like putting together the story. And when we went back later, it was more about filling in blanks, I think. And some of it is memorial, but, a lot of the story was already there, in a sense.
It feels like it's a really, intimate portrait. I'm surprised to discover that you guys didn't know him beforehand. It feels like you're sort of his friends behind the camera there. I mean, did it take a while to sort of gain his trust and for him to open up to the camera, or was that more immediate?
Well,
no, yeah. I mean, Ian and I were shocked. I mean, we didn't know him. Yeah, I mean, that was the pretty remarkable part of it, was that the moment we got to Memphis, I mean, he was very excited about it. He, was definitely just again, very candid, very just open, and
I mean,
we were shocked by it, to be honest.
There's no doubt that it takes a little time to get to a point where somebody's going to open up that much. So it's not like the first day we were there, he just gave us everything. But the first time we met him, when we met him in New York, and he was just, sitting there like with his hair down in front of his face and not really talking, and you're like, oh God, this guy's going to be impossible to shoot. And by the end of that day, he was like, all right, let's do it. I mean, he seemed like he was excited, but we still figured, it was a shock when he did end up opening up. But I think that once we'd been there long enough, he
yeah, I mean, Jay was...
He had a sense that we weren't trying to do something that was going to really exploit him anyway.
I know. I think he definitely understood that. And also, Jay, he was a performer. I mean, he was definitely comfortable around the camera. At times, we were like, okay, are we shooting you too much? And he says, oh, I don't even notice it. So, I mean, that was really what Jay was so comfortable talking about things. And I mean, he definitely didn't open up to anyone, but with us, it just felt very natural. It was very strange.
I interviewed Jay in early 2008, and I remember trying to sort of prepare for the interview and do a bit of research and really just find out all I could about him. This was, I think, before his first Australian tour. And at that time, there was a huge amount of brouhaha online over him punching a kid in the face at a show at a club in Toronto. Yeah. I guess I was really intimidated, and I think what I encountered in the end was much like what you see in the film. He's very charming and friendly, and quite unlike this reputation that sort of precedes him. In some way, is that the purpose of the film, to sort of clear up his legacy?
Well, it's funny because I think maybe he had that idea, but we didn't, because we just, our job is just to shoot and to get what's there. So if Jay had been difficult with us, then that would have been the film, And I think that something we've noticed is there are a lot of people, and I think it's especially kids, who they want to see this dark side and this really aggressive and kind of awful side of Jay, but you'd be hard-pressed to find people who knew him who were like, oh, God, that's how he always was. I mean, he did do terrible things. I mean, he'd get messed up and do crazy things, but there's just not that side of Jay on a regular basis. It was like Jay could break down and be a normal person. So, when we were there, his attitude was it was warts and all. You know what I mean? Whatever it was real, and he was going to give that to us. I don't think that he ends up faking it necessarily.
No, I mean, his close friends who saw the film when we were in Nashville and in Memphis, they said that, wow, that's the Jay I knew. And a lot of people, of course, like fans and people from the outside, never saw that side. And so I think we were excited, when we finally decided to push for the feature and go back down and meet with his friends who were doing a tribute for him to really share the footage that we got. Because, like you said, I mean, everyone has this feeling and thought of him, which was just angry and just hated everyone. So I think that's why we're very excited about it.
I think you had to push Jay's buttons to get that side of him.
Well, that's true.
I think if you were just walking down the street, he wasn't. There's always people who think like you just like run into him and he'd want to punch you, and I don't think that was true for the most part. That reputation probably helped him.
But he wasn't in the film, like you said, I mean, he wasn't necessarily comfortable with the world. I mean, that is true too. He wasn't just gonna be friendly to anyone. I mean, he was definitely closed off, and but he was a businessman. He was a performer, and when he wanted to do something, it's just pretty remarkable. He was just there. He was on.
You guys definitely make a statement by opening the film with that footage from French TV.
Yeah, I love that. We love that interview. I mean, it's so Jay. I mean, that's the thing. It's like things that that's the thing. As much as Jay is so different from maybe all of us, or for Ian and I, we felt like we could relate also. And I think that's what makes it, there's so much universality in him.
He's willing to speak his mind.
Yeah, I wish I could do that.
TV, it's like, I mean, he's just saying what he thinks, and if you don't like the truth, I guess that's too bad. But I always think of people who watch the Bob Dylan film Don't Look Back. I mean, they're like, oh, he's such a terrible person. But it's like, well, you stick the camera in the guy's face and he's not comfortable with it, he's probably going to say some things you don't like, but it doesn't make him a bad person necessarily. It doesn't mean he's that way 24/7.
It strikes me that there's almost this sort of, much like in that footage from French TV, they say, "Oh, you're angry on stage." And he says, "No, I get angry when I do stuff like this." But there is this kind
Exactly.
of there is this two sides of Jay Reatard, and one of them is this sort of. I mean, I think he is angry on stage. You can see that he's mad,
Yeah.
and I remember seeing him at some point in 2009, and I know he talks in the documentary about the how he gets mad when the sound doesn't work, and this is one of those occasions, and he was yelling at the sound guy. I mean, he's pissed off. But also, of course, you see in the film this very lucid and relaxed and calm, composed and charming sort of figure who's in many ways kind of detached from that other side. You see that, I think, most keenly where he's talking about biting a head off a pigeon.
Yeah. He seems pretty, the thing that we noticed is he was a guy who was really aware of those two sides. So a lot of the time we felt like it was not an act, but I mean, it wasn't like he had no control. So, and that kind of leads to another interesting thing, which is when he died, a lot of people were shocked because they were like, we knew Jay was crazy, but it seemed like he was in control of the craziness. It didn't seem like it had a hold over him.
And he wasn't an addict. When we were shooting him, he was sober, actually. So, he drank a few beers, but he'd been sober for, I think, 9 months making that last album, Watch Me Fall. And so we kind of caught him at that time where...
He was lucid.
So Jay died in January of 2010, and I remember immediately after it happened, there were sort of rumors of homicide. The official coroner's report said cocaine toxicity. I noticed that cause of death is something that's conspicuously absent from the film.
Yeah, well, it's because if you actually talk to a lot of his friends, it's pretty difficult to get anybody to give you the specifics. I feel like a lot of people didn't want to talk about it, or it was something that they felt was beside the point on some level. So it was something personal that it didn't have a lot to do with who Jay was. I mean, I'm not going to say anything because I don't really know anything, but it does seem like everybody has kind of their own idea of what was going on in that last week or so and how Jay felt. And, there are a lot of different people who have different perspectives on it. And we could have dwelled on that for a long time, but we weren't there when he died. And just having, the news come in or having any one friend or the other talk about the specifics seemed kind of, like we're just trying to explore something very dark. And what ended up being more of a recurring theme was the shock people had at, like I said before, the sense of like Jay was in control. How is it that this was the moment where he died? Why now? Why when we knew that, things might have been bad for a moment, why is this the moment that took over him, And that ended up being something that we felt more strongly about, I think, in all the footage we had.
And you get this incredible footage at the end. I mean, it works out perfectly at the end of the film where you've been shooting this footage of him kind of sitting out on the porch, and it's even in stark contrast to the rest of the footage there. It's dark. It's the end of the film, and he's reflecting on his mortality and the end of his life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, when we shot that, that was actually the last footage we shot with him ever. And it was eerie at the time as well, a little bit. But at the same time, it was him, exactly, we're talking about his legacy, I guess, or what his thoughts were and his fears. And it's very, very bizarre, but...
it was a moment that just has stuck with us. It stuck with us even before he died, because it was like, wow, this is somebody who really has a very clear idea somehow of what he wants in the future, what he sees his future to be, but at the same time doesn't know. There was like a big unknown there. And when we did the short, it was kind of, we didn't treat it with as much seriousness, I think, as afterwards, because obviously it resonates different when you see it after the fact. But yeah, it's strange. Somebody, I don't remember where, I don't know if I read this or somebody said it, but people said, oh, it's like he knew. It's like he was planning this. He knew he was going to be one of those, not part of the 27 Club because he was proud that he wasn't, but sort of like he knew he was headed for something bad. But we didn't have that impression at the time. It just...
I know. He talks so much about the future, and And that was why everyone was shocked. I mean, really he had so many plans, and he was talking to so many people, producers, and thinking about what to do next. So it was definitely a big shock. And so, yeah, even though he talked about it, it definitely, we didn't see it coming.
It's almost perfect that he's not part of the 27 Club. I think that's far too cliched for a defiant Jay Reatard.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just so easy at that point, and I think he achieved something a little bit outside of what, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying like Jim Morrison didn't achieve something, but Jay was definitely not Jim Morrison. I mean, he was definitely something else.
I know a place where we can go to be alone. I know a place where
If you've just tuned in, I'm talking to Alex and Ian, the directors of the Jay Reatard documentary, Better Than Something. I wanted to ask you guys, did you approach the film as fans?
Well, we became fans when we were making it, really.
Right.
We knew his music, barely. I knew of him. I knew his reputation, but I mean, once you start getting into his music, it's like, it is kind of this like bottomless pit of, it's just it keeps going on and on. So it's kind of exciting, actually.
It was so exciting. I mean, I hadn't been really listening to that kind of music in years, since I was, I guess, in high school. But I just loved it. Once we were really watching tons of archival and getting into, all his old music, and just it just was really amazing. And we became fans, edited it, and then and of course they're still very much big fans.
Yeah. It strikes me that your voice as filmmakers is quite silent in the film. Is that deliberate?
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned before not wanting to sort of weigh in on the cause of death. Is that something that extends throughout the whole film?
Yeah, I mean, it was always the idea that we're not here to say what we think Jay's story is. I mean, the more we can let Jay do it and have his friends or people who knew him fill in, the better. I mean, we have our thoughts about Jay or about his music, but I mean, who
cares?
Yeah, who cares?
I mean, that's the thing. We were also, once we heard again that there was this tribute show, and we had talked to the label, and they're like, oh, might be good to go, and we said, yeah, like, let's go and see what's going on, and I think that we just thought, well, let's get this out there because Jay told his story. Let's try to get this out there because someone else could go and make something and put their voice in it, and why when there is this footage of Jay telling it to us.
I mean, somebody down the line, I guess, could make one of those rock documentaries, and it's all interviews and archival, and I mean, our film is that to an extent, but it's very direct. We tried to, I mean, I guess the best way to put it is we tried to eliminate the middleman as much and let Jay and his closest friends and family say it. And if somebody wants to come in later and have like critics and somebody from whatever magazine or whatever come and say what they think about Jay, I guess that's fine. But I'd rather know what Jay thought. And I feel that way about any other artist that I'd be interested in. It's just more interesting to me to get it directly from the source.
Thank you for watching the film, and we're excited it's playing in Melbourne. Hopefully people will come out.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure they will. Jay's got a lot of fans here.
And Jay was a huge fan of the music down there, so, I think he would be happy to know it was playing.
Great. Okay, Alex Hammond, Ian Markowitz,
Thanks, Ollie.
thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so much.